Hello, everyone. Welcome again. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is something I wish I really didn't have to talk to you about. Because we all know that if you fix the food yourself at home, you're going to do much better. If you follow the instructions that I gave you last night for simple, easy meals, you're always going to be healthier. Unfortunately, we almost always get into a situation where we end up going out to eat, whether for social reasons or for business reasons or just because it's something we got in the habit of doing or we like to do or we don't feel like cooking. That's why restaurants are so popular. I mean, these days, you don't even have to get out of your car. You just drive through. And if you have an app on your phone, you can order ahead of time and it'll be ready for you when you get there. How easy is that? That's even easier than just driving up to the window and ordering it. You just drive through and I think you give them a number and they say, oh, here you are. And so they have made it too easy. And hopefully what I taught you last night has made you realize that for you it can be almost as easy as going through a drive-through window. And you have all the things you need to make it at home, and you know that it's healthier if you eat it at home. But for those few times, remember I said few times when you're going to eat out, I want you to promise me, okay, everybody? A promise. From now on, whenever you go out to eat, you are going to do the very best that you can do. Okay, promise? All right. You're going to remember that the next time you're in a restaurant. I promised Mary. You can't get Amy's on the way home. Amy's is filled with grease. I'm sorry. Amy's is vegetarian. Amy's is vegan. But Amy's has grease. It's just grease. It's McDonald's with grease. Vegan McDonald's, I don't know. Anyway, you can't get Amy's on the way home. And you can't call ahead and order it either and pretend that you didn't know it was full of grease. So what happens to so many people is they go into a restaurant and they look at a menu and they look at it and they study it and they say to themselves, well, I don't see anything on here that fits the McDougall program. So I guess I'll just have chicken tonight. Instead of looking closer and picking out the side dishes and trying to put together something that will really work, or talking to their server, these kind of things just kind of go by the wayside. And they forget it. And so then every time they walk into that restaurant, they already have that mindset, well, there's nothing here that fits the McDougall program, so, I know what I'm going to have. Now, what I want you to do from now on when you walk into that restaurant is to look at that menu with different eyes and talk to your server and ask questions. Do you have anything that you could serve to me? You can explain to them what you do eat and what you don't eat. Do you have anything that fits the way I eat? And in a little while, we'll talk about different ways to find those kind of restaurants. It is difficult to eat out because even the places that try to be vegan usually end up putting way too much oil in the food. or either that or they try to make it Americanized. So yes, there aren't any animals in it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's healthier for you. It might be healthier for the animals, but it's not necessarily healthier for you. And what we're going for here is, yes, I feel sorry for the animals, and I don't want to hurt any animals, but I also want you to be healthy. So let's look for restaurants that we can eat at that keep us healthy, as well as keeping the animals healthy. Now, if you're lucky enough to live in Sonoma County, we actually have many, many restaurants that serve McDougall style food. And you can walk in, it's either written on the wall or they'll give you a McDougall menu. And this started probably 15 years ago. And most of them, I have to admit, are Mexican. And a lot of them are new. New ones get added all the time. Mexican food is real easy to adapt, as we'll see in just a minute. I think the last time they had a McDougall contest, this one happened in 2016, I believe. Let's say best. I can't read it. They had a contest where they have the best Mexican food, the best Asian restaurant, the best Mexican restaurant, the best Chinese restaurant. And they had one category that was the best restaurant that served McDougall food. And this restaurant won the prize. It was East West Restaurant. It's still around. It's about 3 blocks from here. I think the reason they won is because they serve a variety of food. They don't just serve Mexican, although you can get Mexican food there. They don't just serve salads, although you can get salads there. They serve homemade veggie burger that's not processed in a plant made in wherever she said, someplace in Florida. They serve rice and tofu dishes and tabbouleh, and they serve non-greasy foods. You still have to be careful about salt in restaurants. In any restaurant that you go to, restaurants are notorious for dumping salt in the thing, and chefs learn that that's how you make things taste good. You just add a little more salt, or maybe a little more oil, and that's what makes things taste good. But you can find oil-free easier than you can find salt-free. But anyway, this restaurant won the prize. They still serve, they don't call it McDougall-style food, but if you walk in there and mention the word McDougall, they actually know what you're talking about. So they're not going to laugh at you. But let's go on to other restaurants around the country and see what we can find for meals. Now, John and I took all these photos of places that we actually ate and ordered the food. And this would not be a place that you would actually choose if you were looking for a healthy breakfast. But we happened to be in Las Vegas, and I think we were probably staying at the Mirage, and so we thought, well, let's go see what we can find for a healthy breakfast at the Mirage. And the interesting thing is the breakfast that we found at the Mirage is the same breakfast that we order when we go to other restaurants, or even when we're traveling to restaurants that are not the Mirage, but whenever we're having breakfast. We order the same thing for room service. There's just a few key questions that you need to know. We very often order hash browns. Look at how nice and crispy they got them. The key word is here, we would like our hash browns cooked dry. You see, because restaurants have these great flat top stainless steel griddles in every restaurant in the back. And when you order your hash browns, they take their jug of oil and they dump it there like that, and then they pile your hash browns in the center of that glug of oil, and they flatten it down, and they keep flipping it around until it gets nice and brown and crispy. But if you say, I want them cooked dry, they're not going to go back there and clean their whole grill off. They might wipe it down for you if you're lucky, but they won't pour the glob of oil on it. So your potatoes will be put in a dry spot with no extra oil added to them. And they'll still flip them around. They'll cook them the same way. Usually what they say is, it's going to take a little bit more time. And you say, okay, that's fine. I'll wait. And some of them do a really good job and get them nice and brown and crispy. Some of them are a little bit more pale. They didn't let them go long enough, or maybe they thought you were going to get impatient. But basically, they use the same kind of hash brown potatoes that you buy yourself in the market. They're shredded, frozen hash brown potatoes. The same thing is true when you order country-style potatoes. Usually what they do is they fry them up in a frying pan when you order them. But if you say, I'll have the country-style potatoes cooked dry, then they will just be potato chunks cooked on that same flat-top griddle until they're brown and crispy on both sides. So that's the key word, cooked dry. Then you can ask for salsa or ketchup to go on top of your potatoes. You can order oatmeal with no butter or milk. Or you could order grits in the South the same way with no butter or milk. You can order whole wheat toast. Now, you can't read the label on the whole wheat toast package, but you can order whole wheat toast, so at least you're trying. You're saying, I want whole wheat toast. The main word here is no butter. Again, dry. So you order dry toast with no butter, and you can put jelly or jam on it. Yes, I know it's got a little bit of sugar in it. It's not as perfect as maybe you'd find at home. But hopefully this is not going to be your every morning breakfast. This is once in a while. And you can find herbal teas or decaf teas at every restaurant. You can find juices, you can find mixed fruit. So there's breakfast. Pretty much almost perfect. Not perfect, but almost. And at least you tried. You didn't just say, well, I'll have the hash brown potatoes and give me the toast and just take what they gave you. You made an effort to get dry potatoes, dry toast, and you really tried to make it as healthy as possible. Now let's go on to lunch and dinner. Usually our first choice for a lunch menu is a Mexican meal because we both like Mexican food, and it's fairly easy for them to do Mexican food. So what's the first thing that happens when you walk into a Mexican restaurant? What do they give you? Chips. See, you all know that. They give you chips, and what are the chips? They're fried, deep fried in oil. Now they might say to you, well, these are baked. Yeah, they're baked after they're fried. So they're still fried. So they still have the grease on them. Maybe it's just disguised underneath the baking process. But what you say to them, and you're hungry, okay? So you want to have something for a snack. But if you keep the chips on your table, you'll eat them. Happens to everybody, no matter how strong you say, no, I won't eat them. pretty soon one of those chips finds its way into the salsa, and you're hooked. So the best thing to do is to say, take the chips away and bring me some soft corn tortillas. Now, usually in most Mexican restaurants, the soft corn tortillas are oil-free. Not a guarantee, but in general, they are almost always oil-free. The flour tortillas, on the other hand, are never oil-free. Just so you know, when you're ordering, what you're getting. But corn tortillas are almost always oil-free. So you get this nice bowl of soft corn tortillas, and you can break pieces off and dunk it into the salsa. And you have an appetizer, and you're not starving while you're waiting for the rest of your meal. The next thing you have to ask, however, is, do you have whole beans? And then you have to go one step further. What did you cook your beans in? Because unfortunately, just saying do you have whole beans doesn't mean that they cook them the way you would at home, which is you put the beans in a pot with some water and you'd bring them to a boil and you'd cook them, or you put them in your Instant Pot and you'd cook them. Now, if they have whole black beans, they're usually cooked oil-free in water and just have a little bit of salt added to them. So black beans are usually pretty safe. Pinto beans, on the other hand, are not always safe. As a matter of fact, most of you are familiar with Chipotle restaurant. About a year ago, they had signs on the back wall of all their restaurants to tell you that they no longer cooked their pinto beans in pork. Now they cook their pinto beans in water. But for all those years that you didn't know, they cooked their whole pinto beans. Yes, they were whole. They cooked them in pork. So if you didn't ask how they were cooked, you never would have known. So you have to be really careful. If you see a restaurant that only has refried beans on the menu, run the other way. Because to make refried beans, they take whole beans that they've cooked in a pot with water, and they take scoops out and they put them in a big frying pan with either lard or chicken fat or something else, and they mash them and they make them into refried beans. There are only a few Mexican restaurants that I know of in this town, here in Sonoma County, that actually make refried beans without oil or lard. If you're not lucky enough to live here, you're going to have to do some asking. You can't be the shy one that sits in the corner anymore and says, well, I'll have number 14 off the menu. Because it's not going to work that way anymore. You have to be much more specific and order your tortilla the way you want it. For example, when I go out to a restaurant, I always order a bowl. I never get a tortilla. So I get a bowl that's layered with lettuce on the bottom, and then I have whole beans put on top of the lettuce. Then I'll usually get some salsa, maybe some avocado, and sometimes some pico de gallo, which is a tomato onion salsa, and then I'll put salsa over the top of that. And I can get a big bowl and have a delicious meal. I have to usually, well, the restaurant I go to knows me, so I don't have to do it, but if I go someplace else, I always have to remember to say no cheese and no sour cream. Because if you forget to say no sour cream, it'll come out without any cheese, but it'll be loaded with sour cream. So you have to remember to say no cheese, no sour cream. Now, if you want to get your tortilla, your burrito in a tortilla, your best bet is usually the corn tortilla, because that won't have any oil in it. If you don't like corn tortillas and you say, well, I'm only going to do this once in a while, and I want a whole wheat flour tortilla, just realize there's going to be some oil in it, not a whole lot, but just know what you're doing. At least you're aware. If you do this every day for lunch, then I would say, no, probably not. Have the bowl instead, or have a corn tortilla. Or you could bring your own tortilla from home and say, could you make my burrito on this burrito shell? Instead of, people do that, believe it or not, especially if they're going to eat out every day. And restaurants get used to it. And they don't really care because they're going to charge you the same amount anyway, whether you bring your own burrito shell in or not. But if it's only a one-time thing, then just realize what you're doing. You're getting a small amount of oil in that burrito shell. So this is what you're looking for a perfect meal. Whole pinto beans, cooked without any oil or animals. Steamed Mexican rice, maybe with a little tomato sauce added to it. Hard to find, because many Mexican restaurants cook their rice in chicken broth first. So you always have to ask. Some salsa, preferably homemade salsa. Homemade tortillas. This restaurant that we took this picture at makes their own delicious, fresh, homemade tortillas from masa flour and water. And that's all you need. You start out with a little ball that looks like this, and you just flatten it with your hands. If you're really good, it goes really fast. If you're not so good, it takes a long time to get it flat. Or you can buy a tortilla press if you want to make them at home and learn how to do it. But that's all you need. It's just masa flour and water to make an excellent corn tortilla. Another restaurant we choose very often is a Thai restaurant. And the main reason we do it, I'm going to talk about Thai restaurants and Chinese restaurants kind of together. The next restaurant I talk about will be Chinese, because they have short cooking items on their menu, vegetable items and tofu, things that cook quickly, that don't require all day cooking to make a meal. And they will very often have a vegetarian section on their menu. This place had a whole vegetarian section. And many Thai restaurants will have that. So you look through it and you look for which things look reasonable. And then you say, could I have, let's see, they have pad Thai here. Could you do this for me without any oil? And use a little vegetable broth or some soy sauce in the wok as you're sauteing it. Or choose one of the other vegetable dishes. So the main thing you learn to say is, can you make this for me without any oil? And usually they'll say yes, especially if you give them, can you just add a little soy sauce or vegetable broth to saute in instead? If you give them an alternative, if you say, can you do it for me with no oil, very often the answer will be no. But if you give them an alternative, what to use instead, then they can see, oh yes, I guess I could do that without any oil. So ask. They will usually have steamed rice, and it might be white rice, although more and more places are serving brown rice these days. And so you can very often get steamed brown rice to go with your vegetable platter. So this is some of the things that are served at Thai restaurants. This restaurant happened to serve something called McDougall, which is seitan, which is a wheat product. And they made it into a something that looked like a, I don't know, didn't look like duck to me, but it was a seitan product, and it was oil-free. It was not fried.
Here in Santa Rosa?
This was in Santa Rosa, yes. This restaurant has since closed, unfortunately. So I have to look around for another good Thai restaurant. Many Vietnamese places serve steamed roll-ups. I think they're called fresh spring rolls in most places, or fresh summer rolls. And they have rice paper. I don't know if you can tell from here, but it's a white rice paper wrapping that is not fried. It is just softened rice paper, and then it's rolled up with vegetables inside. And you always order the sweet and sour sauce to go with that instead of the peanut sauce. Because in Thai restaurants, they don't make the low-fat peanut butter sauce that I make. And even worse, they make their peanut sauce with coconut milk. So you get a double whammy. A high-fat peanut butter and the nice saturated fat from the coconut milk. So order the sweet and sour sauce instead. You can usually get brown rice, and you can usually find a green salad, and very often they'll have either a lemon dressing or a balsamic dressing or something like that that will be oil-free. Chinese restaurants, very similar. They will usually have a vegetarian section on their menu. This one happens to be called vegetables and bean curd, which bean curd is tofu. And so these things do not have to be prepared ahead of time. It's not a long cooking time. So when you order it, that's when they cook it. So you again ask the same question, can you make this for me? Here's for an example, snow peas and water chestnuts and mushrooms. Could you make this for me with no oil? Just use a little vegetable broth and maybe some soy sauce instead? You'd be surprised at how many places would say yes. When you order tofu, is there a tofu on here? This one, bean curd. This is a lightly fried tofu, which you would want to avoid. You'd ask for braised tofu instead, which means it's just boiled or steamed. You don't want the fried tofu. So it would look like this. These are some of the things you can get in a Chinese restaurant. This would be the braised tofu. It'd still be white. It wouldn't have that fried coating on it, and then it would be acceptable. There's a couple of things here I want to mention. Steamed vegetable pot stickers. See, they look like this. Not perfect. They're made from white flour wrappings. But they have vegetables inside. And they prepare them early in the day because they don't fry them when they make them, because then they would turn hard and nobody would eat them. So they roll them up and lay them on big trays and put them in their walk-in refrigerator. And when you order them, you say, could I have the pot stickers, the vegetable pot stickers, but would you steam them instead of frying them? Because usually on the menu it's going to say fried or lightly fried or pan fried or something like that. And you say, could you steam them instead? Well, all Chinese restaurants know how to steam things. Remember, they sort of invented those stacking steaming baskets, those bamboo baskets. They know how to steam things. You'd be amazed at how many places will say, oh, sure. They just put some lettuce or some greens down in the bottom of their steaming basket, and they lay their pot stickers on top of that, and they just steam them over a wok. And then you have a fairly perfect meal. Now, I'd like it better if it was whole wheat wrappers, but they don't have those. And you can usually get a sweet and sour sauce or a tofu-based sauce to dip them in, again, instead of a... Well, you don't usually have to worry about coconut milk or coconut in a Chinese restaurant. You have to worry about oil, but at least you have to worry about the coconut. They'll usually have some kind of vegetable soup on the menu. They will usually have steamed rice. They'll always have steamed rice. More and more places have brown rice. So always ask. And then you can go to things like broccoli and Chinese mushrooms. Again, you'd say, can you make this without any oil? Mushu vegetables. Now that's what this is right here. You will hardly ever see mushu vegetables on the menu, but you may see mushu chicken or mushu pork. But since it's made to order, you can say, well, could you make mushu vegetables for me instead of mushu chicken or mushu pork? Which means I just want the vegetables. And then you have to also remember to say, please do not add any egg. Because you see, in their mind, they think, oh no, they're not getting any protein because they're not getting the pork or the chicken, so we better throw some egg in there so they get some protein. So you tell them you don't want the egg either. And if you can say, if you have any steamed tofu, that would be okay. You could add that to it. The plum sauce does have some sweetener in it, but it's acceptable. It doesn't have any oil. Now, this is not a perfect meal, but neither was breakfast. And neither was our Mexican meal. But we're getting as close to perfect as we can. At least we're asking questions. And that's the whole idea, is to ask questions. And if you're going to a place that you intend to go to more than once, it really is worth your while to make an appointment with the chef or the manager and say, you know, I would like to come and eat in your restaurant frequently, but I have some dietary restrictions, and so I'd like to know whether you can accommodate me. And then you explain what you don't eat, that you don't want any oil or animals or dairy in your food, and you see if they can do it. And you'd be amazed. I have had so many emails from people that have come through the program and said, you know, I live in a small town. There was one Chinese restaurant that I used to love to go to, and I never thought I could ever eat there again. And I went in there and I talked to them, and now I walk in the door and they greet me by name, and they know exactly what I want to eat, and it's almost perfect every time. So it's like having your own chef. So if you're going to eat at a place more than once, and it's your favorite place in town, then take the time and make the effort to go there and talk to them. And then you'll get what you want. Now, eating at Italian places is much more difficult because these are long cooking foods. They start their marinara sauce early in the morning, and how do you think they do it? Glug, 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 glug. The olive oil goes in, and then they add the onions and celery, and maybe some mushrooms, and they cook it all day. And you can't say to them, do you have any marinara sauce without olive oil? Because they don't. That's the way they make it. Now, you might find a place that will stir fry you some fresh onions and mushrooms and celery and fresh tomatoes and maybe a few olives. And you can have like a pasta primavera without any oil. So if you ask, you might be lucky. The next thing you have to ask is, what kind of pasta do you have? Because if it's a good Italian restaurant, they pride themselves on making their own pasta, fresh pasta. And how do they make fresh pasta? With eggs. They always use water and eggs. It's not necessary. You can make delicious pasta without eggs. I've made my own pasta without eggs. There's a actual store here in town called Pasta Etc. that makes delicious fresh pasta in all different shapes and sizes and everything else, and they make it all just with water. And that's all. No eggs. But most Italian restaurants will have at least one of their pastas made without eggs because they know that some people are allergic to eggs. So you say, which one of your pastas does not have eggs in it? And hopefully they'll have one. Usually it's the angel hair pasta. Not always, so ask. Marinara sauce, as I told you, is hopeless. So ask them if they can stir fry you a pasta primavera without any oil. And minestrone soup, I haven't found one. Well, I found one place that makes minestrone soup with vegetable broth, but it's already got that glug, glug, glug in there. You can't get it without the oil. So minestrone soup you're going to have to make at home. Pizza. There are all kinds of pizza places around. And unfortunately, things are pre-made these days, okay? So not the whole crust, but there's a ball of dough that's already been pre-made early in the morning. Heather and I make our own pizza. And we pre-make it and put it in little balls or put them in the freezer or something like that. We don't make ours with oil, but they do. So the oil's already in there. So when you order it, they take out that ball of dough and they roll it out and it's got the oil already in it. Now it's just a little bit, so it's not too bad. Then they're going to put some marinara sauce on the top of it. There's going to be oil in that. But now, hopefully not too much because, you're getting just a regular pizza with a light coating of red sauce. And then your choices are, what are you going to put on top? Well, there's all kinds of good things. I don't know if you can see them here, but there's mushrooms and zucchini and pineapple and bell pepper and red onion. All kinds of delicious vegetables that you can pile on your pizza to cover up those 2 glugs of olive oil. And then what you say to them is, I'll have it with no cheese, please. Because an average large pizza contains about from 700 to 1,000 calories, fat calories, of cheese. And if you leave that off, you have a delicious, fairly healthy meal with just 2 glugs of olive oil in it. And if you don't eat the whole thing yourself, then it's not so bad. So you share it with your friends. So in a nice Italian restaurant, you would go for mixed greens with maybe a little balsamic vinegar as a dressing. This restaurant had a wonderful potato, leek, and fennel soup. And John was sure that they had dairy in it because there was so much sweetness in the soup. I swear to you, he sent our waiter back to the kitchen 5 times because he was sure that there was dairy in that soup. And the waiter finally came back and said, well, the chef said, I'll share my secret with you. I'm tired of you coming back here all the time. And he said the secret ingredient in his soup was parade pears. And that gave it the sweetness of dairy. So you always have to ask. And you know us, we will always ask. So they made us a pasta with some black olives and some tomatoes and some red peppers and stirred it up with a non-egg-based pasta that they had, and they made us a pizza with roasted vegetables and no cheese. So we did fairly well. Another choice you might have, and you'd be surprised when I say it to you, is that you might do better in a Japanese restaurant than you do anywhere else. But when I say the word sushi to people, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Fish. Raw fish. But that's not what sushi is. Raw fish is sashimi. Sushi is rolled rice balls. Yes, very often it has raw fish on top of either the shaped rice ball or the rolled rice ball. Very often they put fish on it. But they can make delicious vegetable sushi. This whole platter here on the top is filled with vegetable-based sushi. And they have sushi chefs that go to school and train for years on how to make excellent sushi. And they have all kinds of fresh vegetables behind their sushi bar. So you can go in and say, could you make me some fresh vegetable rolls that don't have any fish? And they'll say, sure. There's not any oil in the rice. There might be a little sugar and a little vinegar, but that's okay. And it's not always even white rice anymore. More and more places are using brown rice to make their sushi rolls. So you could get a whole tray of this. These happen to be called fudamaki, which is big rolls. Fudamaki, big roll of vegetables. And you can order this in any Japanese restaurant. You could walk out of there just eating this and be stuffed and probably have had your most perfect meal of all the ones you've had. You can also order edamame, steamed soybeans, and you have to pop them out of the shell. Now, soybeans are a high-fat bean, but you're going to have to work at it a little bit, so you're not going to eat a whole bunch of them. And they're just an appetizer. Miso soup. See the miso soup right here? Every Japanese restaurant has miso soup. The problem with miso soup is that miso itself is a fermented paste, so it's kind of salty. So you don't use a lot of it, but it does add flavor. But because it's fermented, it's not supposed to be cooked. It's just supposed to be added to a cooked broth and then stirred up until it blends in. Unfortunately, in most Japanese restaurants, the cooked broth that's sitting in the back is made from either a fish broth or bonito flakes, which are fish flakes. And they take out a scoop of that and put it in a bowl and add some miso to it and stir it up until it becomes a paste, and then add a little more of the fish broth and stir it up, and then add some seaweed and some green onions and a little bit of tofu, and they bring you out a bowl of miso soup. It's got the fish broth in it. But you know what? I have recipes either online or in most of my books on how to make miso soup without the fish broth. All you need is boiling water. And in restaurants, they can do the same thing for you. You ask them, can you make the miso soup for me and use boiling water instead of the boiling fish stock? And guess what? Most places will be more than happy to do it for you. They know how to do it. It's easy. And it tastes so much better. So just ask. You have to get used to asking questions. That's really important. So you could have almost a perfect meal in a Japanese restaurant. Hard to believe. The next place, probably the best thing I could tell you to do when you saw the words Indian food over the door would be to run. Because you can't find oil-free Indian food. You can find vegan Indian food easily, but it's all greasy. They have to make the food ahead of time because it's long cooking foods like potatoes and beans and peas and even the lentils. They cook them in the morning. And what do you think they cook them in? Glug, glug, glug. They got their olive oil or some other kind of oil. And then what's even worse is they keep this in the back already made, and when you order it, they have to reheat it, and then they add some ghee, which is clarified butter, on the top. So it's a double whammy. So you can't get away from it. Even if you go in there and you say, could you bring me the, let's see, what do we have here? Aloo gobi, the cauliflower and potato. Could you bring it to me without the ghee? You still have the oil that they cook it in. And if you've ever eaten a plate of Indian food and looked at your plate after you were finished, what do you see? A huge layer of oil. So I would advise you make your Indian food at home and avoid Indian restaurants. I have not yet found a good one that will make the food without oil. American cuisine. What could I say about American cuisine? Well, we like burgers, we like fried chicken, we like French fries, lots of brown and yellow food, all covered with grease. And that's the kind of food we eat. And then what do we have on the side? A salad bar. And very often you will walk into a restaurant and say to your waiter or your waitress, do you have anything vegetarian on the menu? And they'll say, we have salads. Like, that's all we eat? Is salads? And we'll say usually, no, well, we'd like something a little more hearty than a salad. And so it helps to look through the menu, find some side dishes. Maybe they have baked potatoes on the side. Very often, you'd be surprised, in a steakhouse, you can sometimes find your best meal by ordering the baked potato, the steamed vegetables, a side of salad. And if you get really smart, like I've done for years, when John and I were younger, we had a favorite place that we used to like to eat before our children were born. It was in Honolulu, a great big salad bar. And we'd go there and we'd enjoy the salad bar. We'd have a baked potato and steamed vegetables. And I always carry a big black purse. As a matter of fact, I actually need my big black purse for a little bit later in the talk. So if somebody could bring it up here, I'll show you my big black purse. And what I used to do is I would take out of my big black purse, because I always had a big purse, before I even had kids. I'd take my jar of fat-free salad dressing out of my purse and put it on the table. And do you think the restaurant cared? You see my big black purse? I've always had something like this. Thanks. And a jar of salad dressing fits nicely in a bag like this. And the restaurant doesn't care. And we would have our own salad dressing and serve it on top of it, use it on our baked potato, use it on our steamed vegetable, use it on all the different salads that we choose. If you're not lucky enough to have enough time, or if you are lucky enough to have enough time, then call ahead. If you know you're going out to a restaurant with friends or for a business meeting, Call ahead. Tell them how you eat. Don't tell them what you want them to make for you. Just tell them what you don't eat. Can you make me something without any animal products, without any added oils, without any dairy? You'd be surprised what they will come up with, because they get bored cooking the same thing every day. We just got back from a trip to Kauai, and those are the instructions that I gave the chef before we got there. I didn't tell him what to make us. I told him what we didn't eat. And they came up with some of the greatest stuff we've ever had. And they were happy to do it because they get bored cooking the same thing all the time. So why not? And then you're at this restaurant and they come out with this wonderful platter of food for you, and all the people that are with you say, "How'd you get that? I want what she's having." Well, unfortunately, we only made one because I only had one call for it. So I don't have any more in the back. So call ahead. Ask for what you want. Look at the side dishes on the menu and just keep asking questions. Do you have this? Could you do this for me? Will you help me out here? Don't come in there with the attitude, I know you're not going to be able to help me, or it's just going to be awful. Go in there with the attitude like, can you help me? What could you suggest? Get them working with you. Get them on your side, and then you'll find very often that they go beyond salads. And they'll find different things on the menu, and they'll say, well, I'll talk to the chef, and I'll see if he can, maybe put this side dish with these mushrooms and maybe some a baked potato, and just get them working with you, and you might end up with a really great meal. When you see veggie burger on the menu, sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's not a good thing. Because very often veggie burgers are all made in some plant in who knows where, and they're nicely rounded, and then they're frozen, and they're stacked up in these plastic bags, and they're shipped out to restaurants all around the country, all made by the same company, and usually all containing the same ingredients, which are cheese, egg whites, and oil, and soy protein very often. And so those are the things you want to avoid. So you're looking for a place that makes their own burger in-house. And there are more and more places that do this. And so then you can at least ask questions about what's in the burger. How did you fix it? Now these places are familiar to almost everyone. Subway, Porta Subs, any place that makes sandwiches. They make them from scratch. So you can order whole wheat bread or a whole wheat bun, order all the vegetables, and you go down the line with them and you tell them exactly what you want on your sandwich. Just remember to say no mayonnaise, no cheese. Get it all piled up really high. You've got a great meal without any of the junk. Really easy. And you can find them everywhere. So as you've seen, what we've talked about are mostly ethnic restaurants. American restaurants just don't really have a whole lot to offer. And even if you look for vegan restaurants, what you're going to find is a place that has tried to imitate American food by making it vegan. And usually it's a big piece of fake meat, trying to imitate the meat on the American plate, and a few sides of vegetables. So it's really difficult to even find a vegan restaurant. So you have to ask questions and never give up, because you're worth it. Your body is worth it. So you can eat out, you just have to be careful. And let me tell you a couple of other things that I have right here. There's a couple of really important things that you should note. And one of them is an app for your phone called Happy Cow. You're making the cows happy because you're not eating them. And the restaurants listed on Happy Cow are all vegan or vegetarian or veg-friendly, which means they will work with you. And it goes through restaurants, different kinds of restaurants by city, depending on where you are. So you can take it with you when you travel. It asks if you want to be connected to where you are, and you say yes. And it'll give you restaurants in the area that you are that are veg-friendly or vegetarian, or at least have something that you can ask about, and they'll work with you. And if you're doing this ahead of time, then you could go online and actually look at their menu ahead of time and find out what they do serve. And maybe even call them and ask them if they have anything that you can eat. So it's not as difficult as it used to be, and the app makes it a little bit easier. That's the only app I know of so far that is for restaurants. There are places online called, one of them is called vegdining.com, and they actually do the same thing, but it's online, and they go, they have veg dining in Rome and in all cities all around the world. So you can go to San Francisco, Boston, Miami, just all over Australia. And so you can check out the restaurants before you get there. It's really difficult to ask a taxi driver or the concierge in your hotel, where's a good Mexican restaurant? Because they don't eat like you do. They might be looking for something completely different. So if you have an app or you have looked ahead of time online for a restaurant, then you're much more likely to get someplace that's at least willing to work with you. And then you can eat out again and not feel guilty about it. Thank you very much.
Does anyone have any questions? No.
You know, Mary,
Oh.
you might mention cooking with coconut extract if you want to make Thai food instead of coconut.
Okay, a good point. Okay, I didn't talk about this either last night, but I do talk about it in class sometime. In Thai restaurants, one of the things that you have to avoid is the coconut milk in the curry, because coconut milk is really high in saturated fat. But I have learned how to make my own coconut milk healthy. You can buy light coconut milk in the supermarket, but it's still high in saturated fat. But you can make your own. You can't take it with you to the restaurant, however. I've never tried that. You can make your own with using almond milk or soy milk. Rice milk doesn't work too well because it's too thin. But take 1 cup of the plant milk and use 1 teaspoon of coconut extract and stir it in. and it ends up tasting just like coconut milk. So if you want to make a coconut dish at home, use this coconut extract and the plant-based milk instead. But you can't take it with you to a restaurant. If you have a question, you can go over there so that we could all hear you.
Well, how about the light coconut milk? Like you take a young coconut, baby young coconut. So
You'd be using the water.
Use the water of the
Use
coconut.
the water.
And then you
that-
use the very.
If you use the flesh, you're still going to get some of the saturated fat, even if it's a young coconut.
Really?
Yes.
Oh wow. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mom.
Okay.
We have another great meal planned for you. Lunch is ready. Enjoy.